Chapter 2 Tears. Candace's point of view. Candace snorted as she turned and looked at the cemetery. Grady was right. It is creepy to have the family cemetery this close to the house. She wondered which had come first, the cemetery or the house. Then she wondered if it contained a crypt. Candace jumped back from the railing when she saw a shadow in the cemetery. She pressed her hand against her pounding heart and took a deep breath.
It's just my wild imagination.
She reassured herself. Or is it? After all, the haunted cemetery is what attracted people to this location. She returned to the room and approached the bed where her bag was. She didn't feel like unpacking right now. She knew they planned to stay for at least a week, possibly longer. She didn't want to sort through her clothes at that moment. Moreover, she had no idea what Anne-Marie had packed for her. Her friend and family have been incredibly supportive over the past 3 days. None of them have said anything about her being left at the altar, and no one has said anything to her about her not crying. They talked among themselves, thinking she was asleep, but she heard them. Her father and brothers went to the condo she had shared with Donald to collect her belongings. Fortunately for Donald, he wasn't home at the time. She knew about her brothers breaking a few of Donald's prized vases, which he had collected during his travels. She'd overheard them laughing about it. The lease for the condo was in her father's name, so her father left a note for Donald, stating that he needed to move out within 1 week or he would have his belongings tossed onto the streets. 1 week was very generous of her father. Candace would have given him an hour. Candace shook her head as she exited the room and went downstairs for dinner. Dining area. Candace's point of view. Dinner was quiet as Candace sat with Anne-Marie and Grady at the table. They attempted to include her in their conversations, just as they had for the past 3 days. Candace merely nodded or shrugged, saying nothing. With a heavy sigh, they gave up and started talking to each other about what they planned to do in their small bed. Candace jumped to her feet, tired of hearing their lovey-dovey talk. Anne-Marie and Grady turned their heads to stare at her.
I'm going for a walk.
Candace said before turning and leaving the dining hall. Anne-Marie's point of view.
Oh, no.
Anne-Marie whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Grady smiled.
She said more than 1 or 2 words.
Anne-Marie stared at him.
Grady.
She shouted, hitting him on the shoulder. He looked at her, perplexed.
We were just being all lovey-dovey and talking about sex.
Ah, shit.
Grady grumbled.
I'm going to...
She started to say as she stood.
Leave her be.
He said, gently pulling her back into her seat.
Grady?
She asked, gazing into his bright blue eyes. He was incredibly handsome, with his dark blonde hair and striking blue eyes. Among the 5 Donaldson children, Grady and Candace were the only ones to inherit their mother's blue eyes, while Brad, Howard, and Andrew took after their father with his vivid green eyes. Although Grady's blue eyes were bright, like a clear blue sky, Candace's were darker, like a storm on the horizon. With her light brown hair and stunning beauty, she had become the envy of every girl in school. All except Anne-Marie, of course. She knew her best friend was more than just beautiful on the outside. She possessed inner qualities that truly mattered. Outside, under the pale moonlight, Candace's point of view. Candace found herself walking through the cemetery. There were no crypts, only numerous tombstones, some of which dated back to the early 1800s, confirming her earlier question. She knew the Postals built the house in the mid-19th century. That meant they established the cemetery first. Candace found herself standing before the tombstone of the last of the Postal generation, Jacob Eugene Postal Jr., beloved son, 1988 to 2009. Candace blinked. He was only 21 when he died. Over the years, many people have speculated that Jacob Jr. took his own life. Some believe he fell, while others think he was murdered, tossed over the rails.
You didn't even have enough time to fall in love.
She whispered as she knelt before the grave.
But then, what do I know about love? The man I believed I loved and who claimed to love me in return left me at the altar. Now, I am doomed to be a laughingstock.
She felt her eyes well up with tears for the first time in 3 days.
What do I have to complain about? I was only left at the altar. You're dead.
The tears started to flow freely now.
What is wrong with me that I'm a cold fish?
She almost screamed as she cried even harder. Crying felt good. She had been holding it in for so long, too long, somewhere beyond the stars. Jacob's point of view. Jacob Postal Jr. heard someone crying. It didn't sound like ordinary sobs. It resembled the anguished wails of a soul being torn in two. Where was it coming from? He felt an irresistible pull toward the source of the cries. He grunted when he found himself in the family cemetery. Ever since his home was converted into a bed and breakfast, he had avoided this place like the plague. He attempted to leave but found himself unable to do so. The anguished cries echoed from within the cemetery. Intrigued, he ventured inside. He acknowledged the other spirits surrounding him before coming to a halt. Before his tombstone knelt a young woman. Her tears tore at his heart and soul.
Who is she?
He wondered.
Do I know her? Yeah. It's pretty sad, huh?
He said, laughing. He always found his death humorous, considering they never saw it coming. The crying stopped as the woman turned to face him. Jacob stared at her. She was beautiful, despite her puffy red eyes. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever encountered. He gazed into her eyes. They were the most stunning shade of blue, like a storm. She was looking directly at him.
Can she see me? Hi.
He said with a smile. Not that he believed she could see him. The woman emitted a horrifying scream and fainted. He attempted to disappear, but was unable to. A group of people ran from the house to the cemetery.
Candy?
A woman shouted as she rushed to the unconscious woman.
Candy?
Jacob mused. That sounds like a stripper's name.
Candace.
A man bellowed as he lifted the woman into his arms. Jacob's eyes narrowed. Candace. Now that suits her. The man appeared to be a relative of the unconscious Candace. He was likely her brother.
Get her inside.
The short, portly woman commanded as she pushed people aside. The blond man carried Candace to the mansion. Jacob felt himself pulled along with them.
This is new.
He thought as he followed them through the mansion. Jacob despised what they did to his home. He'd tried haunting it for a while, tried to scare people enough to make them leave, and forced the bed and breakfast to shut down. However, it hadn't worked out as he had hoped. He'd wasted all his efforts. Instead of achieving his goal, he only made the place more appealing, exciting, and popular. He grumbled when they entered his old room and placed the woman on his bed. It was bad enough that they invaded his home, but then they went and invaded his bedroom, his sanctuary. He paused and observed the woman on his bed. She looked good in his bed, as if she belonged there.
Grady, look.
The other woman whispered.
She was crying.
Grady smiled when he noticed the dried tears on his sister's cheek. Jacob scowled. What kind of people take joy in other people's sorrow?
Let's leave her.
The woman said with a smile as she pulled the man out of the room. With a broad smile, the man, Grady, left the room and closed the door behind them. Jacob sat in the chair beside the double doors and found himself watching the woman as she slept. She looked so peaceful. He sighed as he attempted to leave again, but still couldn't.
All right.
He grumbled.
I will at least stay long enough to see why she can see me when no one else can.
He leaned back and waited for the beauty to awaken. Jacob watched the woman sleep peacefully in his bed. She still looked sad. And how had he heard her sobs? He'd been far away from here. Perhaps he'd heard her because she'd been at his grave. But that didn't explain how she could see him and why he couldn't leave. She stirred and he jumped to his feet, then moved to stand at the foot of the bed. Candace's point of view. Candace slowly opened her eyes. Where was she? The last thing she remembered was being in the cemetery. How did she end up in bed? Grady must have carried her here, but how did he know where to find her? He must have heard her scream. But why had she screamed again? Memories of the man in the cemetery flooded her mind. Who was he? Surely not a ghost. No, there's no such thing as ghosts. Is there?
I see you're finally awake.
Candace sat up and nearly screamed again.
Please don't scream again.
He begged, watching her. Candace closed her mouth. Who was this man? And why was he in her bedroom? She asked him as much, and he smirked in response.
Actually, madam, you are in my room, lying in my bed.
She stared at him. Had they overbooked this room? She paused and took a deep breath.
I can find you a new room.
She offered as she rose from the bed.
I don't want a new room.
He grumbled.
This has always been my room.
She stared at him. Had he actually been here first? Had they booked her on top of him? Was he supposed to check out but refuse to leave?
I will see what they can do.
She said. She got off the bed and walked out the door. She turned to find him following her. Grumbling to herself, she descended the stairs to the reception desk.
Excuse me.
Oh, you're awake. It's so nice to see that you're all right. You had us worried.
The young woman behind the desk said with a smile. Candace didn't smile back. She just nodded.
I believe there has been a mistake. You see, this man claims that my room is also his.
She said, gesturing toward the man standing behind her. The woman glanced behind Candace and furrowed her brows.
What man?
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Candace groaned and rolled her eyes.
He came to my room, but I saw him in the cemetery before that.
She informed the woman. Jacob's point of view. Jacob laughed and said,
Reminder of how I made you scream.
he was thoroughly enjoying himself. After 10 years of no contact with the living, he found this woman more and more fun to be around. Her cheeks got the prettiest blush across them every time she became flustered. Candace's point of view.
Look,
Candace muttered, irritated with the two of them for playing a prank on her. She didn't like these kinds of games.
please just check and see who else got assigned to my room.
Exasperated, the woman behind the counter did as Candace asked.
No one else has been assigned to that room, ma'am.
Candace grumbled as she turned to the man.
See? Now please leave my room.
Jacob's point of view. Jacob grinned and replied.
Nope.
Candace stomped her feet and marched to the stairs. Jacob laughed at the expression on the receptionist's face. He could see the wheels turning in the woman's mind. He felt himself pulled back to his room.